Good morning. My name is Tom Fiddler, and along with my colleague Nancy Berg from Westminster's Faith and Action Council, we are pleased to welcome you and our panel of guests representing 5 of Westminster's community partners providing services to address homelessness and affordable housing in our community. The social justice forums are built around a common theme, and this program year, the theme is Building Solidarity Together, walking alongside all God's people, striving for a more just world, acting courageously to transform social systems and relationships. Shortly, our panelists will introduce their organizations and their respective roles in each of these. Following that, Nancy will lead off with questions for our guests as they hear from each of our partner organizations. Please note that after the 10:30 service today, all of these organizations will be at tables in Westminster Commons where you may find out more about engaging with their respective organizations. As part of our ongoing effort to promote respectful conversations around concerns for our community, the social justice team has established guidelines for the social justice forums that you now see on the screen. This morning I'd like to highlight the last of those, honoring the image of God. We'll avoid stereotypes and generalities, especially those related to specific racial and ethnic members of our community. And please take a minute to review all of the guidelines. And before we get started, a short prayer. Let us pray. Holy One, God of justice, breathe into us today a spirit of curiosity and humility. Help us engage with mindfulness, following the lead of voices from our community. Guide our speech and our self-awareness so that we may honor the divine in all people. Amen. So now I'll hand things off to Nancy as we begin the first round of questions with our panelists.
Thanks, Tom, and thank you everybody for being here. Welcome. The group of people we have here with our community partners, as Tom mentioned, they're doing really amazing things in our community. So I'm so glad that you can be here and at least see them and hear a few things that they have to say. So let's kick off. If you each want to take a minute or so to introduce yourselves and talk about what your organization is doing before we get started. Go ahead, Paul.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Vleem. I am the Development Director for Urban Homeworks. We are based in North Minneapolis. Our mission is to lead the fight for housing justice so that all people have a safe, stable, and dignified place to live. And we've been doing that for 30 years. It will be 30 years in 2025. We do that through affordable rentals, home ownership options, and increasingly policy to ensure that, again, that all people have a safe, stable, and affordable place to live.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tamara Stark, and I work as Senior Director for Housing and Youth Development with Tubman. We're a community-based anti-violence organization serving the Twin Cities Metro, working to end and prevent violence and associated traumas. We work in schools, homes, courts. We're working to build thriving people, healthy relationships, and peaceful communities. Ultimately, we have a range of staff, volunteer support, and collaborations to help achieve that goal. Thank you all.
Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Cuff. I am the Director of Development and Communications with Avenues for Youth. And Avenues supports youth experiencing homelessness to achieve their dreams. We support youth ages 16 to 24 and have been doing that for nearly 30 years, like Paul's organization. And each night in Minnesota, almost 4,000 young people experience homelessness. And so Avenues provides 4 solutions, or avenues for that, pun intended, through transitional housing, shelter and transitional housing, a host home model, and a young families rapid rehousing model.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Huffman. I'm Executive Director at Our Saviour's Community Services. We started about 40 years ago in the early 80s in response to community needs in South Minneapolis, not far from Franklin and Chicago. And we have 2 different programs under the umbrella of Our Saviour's Community Services. We have the English Learning Center That's a program that's volunteer-led English classes for folks who didn't grow up speaking English. Many of them have been here for a week or two or up to 10 years. And then we also have Our Saviour's Housing, which has an emergency shelter. It's a 21-bed shelter and respite program, and then that's 24/7. We also have permanent supportive housing, both site-based, so located on our campus, as well as scattered throughout Hennepin County. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Carla Henderson. I am Senior Vice President of Housing Stability at Project for Pride in Living. We've been doing affordable housing for over 50 years, started at Franklin and Chicago by a former priest by the name of Joe Savaggio, who just recently passed. So we believe kind of in the holistic approach. We have one half of our organization that houses about 3,500 people every night in 1,600 units. And then the other side of our coin is workforce development and career readiness and home ownership. I will say that I recently moved here to Minnesota about 3.5 years ago. Prior to coming to PPL, I was community development director for the city of Bloomington. I remember my first day arriving, all of my interviews were virtual, and they said, you're gonna need to get on a service provider call because during COVID, the hotels were housing people experiencing homelessness. And I thought, oh, I didn't even know that was a challenge here. And I remember getting on the call with Mike and hearing about the challenges that were happening. So I'm happy to be here to talk about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, really, and thank you for the great work you're doing in the community. We all acknowledge the challenges that we're facing, and your good commitment is really making a difference. Ready to get started? All right, our first question, and we'll have a few of them answer each of these just in the interest of time. Hopefully we'll have a couple seconds at the end to ask your questions, and if not, we can follow up at coffee hour. Number one, as your organization serves people who are experiencing homelessness or who are seeking affordable housing, tell us how you're going about establishing real relationships in our community. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we, survey all ages, backgrounds, abilities, and it's really key that people trust us and are able to get support navigating very complex systems. Violence is one of the leading causes for homelessness in our communities, and a lot of people are still learning that, and so getting the word out about that, because a lot of people just think, oh, if someone's experienced that, they have a home to go back to. No, people haven't, and they need that stable housing. So we do a lot of support with property managers, too, to ensure that they're aware of survivor rights in housing. And we co-develop our programs. Very happy at our agency that all the work we do is designed with input from people we've served. So they've led the charge in that. All credit to the people we serve in shaping and influencing, saying what they need and what's important to them. And that's really meaningful and relevant then, and I'm very happy about that. And then they trust us more too, because we're really invested in meeting their needs, and not just their needs, meeting their strengths. The people we serve are incredible, have amazing strengths, and just helping them get there with a person to help navigate all the options, resources out there that can walk alongside.
I think the comment about trust is huge. For Urban Homeworks, we've been around for 30 years. 25 years has been right in the heart of North Minneapolis at Emerson and Broadway. And having that heart in North Minneapolis, people have known us for a long time, have grown up around us for a long time. And I had said our mission is to lead the fight for housing justice. We chose that mission pretty specifically because that's often how we're showing up in spaces and have a reputation of fighting for our neighbors. So when Mahmoud Khan did terrible things in caring for his residents in properties, or Steve Meldal did terrible things in caring for his neighbors or his residents. Urban Homeworks was the one who was leading the fight through a lawsuit against him to make sure that as a landlord you have responsibilities to your neighbors. As we step into policy, we are asking our neighbors, we're asking our residents to share what their solutions are for what affordable housing should look like, what dignified housing should look like, and then bringing legislators in front of those residents. And so we have that reputation of connecting residents to decision makers, and when the systems fail, that we are there to show up and fight for them to ensure that they're not left at the wayside. And so we have this incredible reputation in that way. We also have the reputation of being from community. So 65% of our staff and board are people of color. Over 50% of our staff and board live in North Minneapolis, including myself. I love living in North Minneapolis. I encourage everyone to come to North Minneapolis. And it's being a neighbor, seeing our residents, seeing folks that we work with every day in the grocery store and the banks, that builds a reputation and builds a trust that we're there for them.
I think that's great. I will add that at Project for Pride and Living, we work closely with a number of nonprofits, service providers. Of the 1,600 units, half are supported by our resident service team. We just recently opened a project over in Highland Bridge in St. Paul called Restoring Waters, and we partnered with Emma Norton, which is a nonprofit that helps support women and families coming out of homelessness. And that 60 units is completely 30% AMI. So these are very, very challenged, economically challenged individuals. And one of the things I want to highlight about that project is there's a meditation room and a fitness room. And it was really designed with the intentionality of, combating trauma. And they just opened up a living room, which is an alternative for people that are experiencing mental health crises. Instead of going to the emergency room, residents of Restoring Waters and of the community can come to the living room and get care.
I was going to say that something different, that my organization is part of a collaborative that supports youth experiencing homelessness. And so it's really important, I think, for our organizations to be in community, partnering with our peers to do this work. We can't do it all alone and solve the problems in isolation. And so the Youth Services Network exists. It's a collaboration of 20+ organizations supporting youth experiencing homelessness. Each of us do a little bit of different work. And so at Avenues, we have a shelter location in North Minneapolis and one in Brooklyn Park. Our Brooklyn Park location, for example, is one of the only, provides housing, one of the only housing resources for youth experiencing homelessness in the Northwest Metro. So what we do in the Youth Services Network is collaborate to make sure if we're going to grow, if we're going to expand, that we're doing that in coordination with others in the community. And it's also the way that young people find us. There's an app that they can go to, and the website shows bed availability. And so that's really important that we collaborate and we don't do our work in isolation.
Okay, I've got a question. Next question here. The voices of people with lived experience of homelessness are central to addressing homelessness. Describe how your organization involves the people they serve in making decisions. Maybe Mike, could you?
Sure, I can start with this one. So it starts at the top, I would say. Our board and staff have lived experiences of the folks that we serve. So housing instability, folks who have immigrated to this country, didn't grow up speaking English as a first language. And so with our staff, that trust is built because we know that when somebody walks in the door, we are a smiling, friendly face. And so they can trust us a lot easier when that happens. We also have the Participant Advisory Council, which is made up of participants from each of the 3 different program areas. And that meets quarterly with me and then a member of our board. And so that is a direct way to inform the direction of the organization. One just quick example, we were attempting to roll out more of a qualitative survey adapted from a Harvard survey that they were doing, and presented it to this committee the Participant Advisory Council, and they gave us feedback that made us actually pause and not do that survey because of the way that it made people feel, because of the way that it was challenging to answer questions without the kind of necessary support that we couldn't offer at the time. And so, we also are in the process of doing a property reimagining of our campus and have done invited people like from our shelter and from our residences to inform what that could look like, including having a current resident on the kind of committee that's taking charge and giving that direction.
Our president CEO, Paul Williams, always says, how we build is just as important as what we build. So community engagement is at the forefront of what we do. And many times as we're starting to come up with a concept, we will hear from the community whether they are intending to live in the property or not. We're doing a project in East 7th in St. Paul, and we learned that was a large immigrant, multi-generational community. So we're building 3 and 4 and 5 bedroom apartments, all affordable. So again, listening to the community.
Thank you. I would add for us, really always, the founding of our organization, just trailblazers involved up to present. And I think we have advisory boards, we have co-developed, so we're paying people for their input on designing programs. I care about this personally, so yes, I would do it for free, and ultimately with my lived experience, I am paid to be there, so it's really important. I think the expertise in the moment from the people we're serving, including youth, to be compensated for their up-to-the-minute expertise is really what drives things forward. It does make funding a particular challenge, so I just want to highlight that. I've been at Tubman for 26 years and through all the growth and transition, and I love it. One unique thing I think was keying in on the voices of children and youth early on, because they're the invisible homeless many times, and it still is the case to this day. So the ages 24 and under, significant impact of all forms of violence and trauma. And I want to give them a special thanks because they're the ones years back who learned about some of the data out there and said, we have got to get over this hump and get stable housing with comprehensive, trusted, meaningful support. We have dreams, the adults in our lives have dreams, and we're going to make this happen. and so just seeing that through and through, and the more allies we have on that, things will get better.
Thank you. Go ahead, Melissa. Go. Yeah.
I can just add a little bit to what Tamara said in the ways that we support youth, and I think Avenues does all the things that my fellow panelists are talking about. One specific example I'll highlight: when we were considering growing our Young Families program, we held listening sessions, compensated our former young families for participating in those sessions, but we heard loud and clear that what they wanted was caring staff, and so we and I wrote it down. They said they specifically wanted staff who had empathy, caring, who were Black, Indigenous, and people of color, who had patience and good communication skills. They articulated all of that in the listening session. So what we did is prioritize hiring an additional full-time staff member when we doubled the size of the program to maintain those low ratios and make sure that we included those aspects in the hiring process. At Avenues, we also involve young people in our hiring process, our interviews for staff. And so as a result, we have 2 amazing youth advocate engagement specialists in that Young Families program. But I really believe it's because of that input from youth and that youth engagement in the process.
Sure, go ahead, Paul.
So for Urban Homeworks, we monthly have gatherings of our residents. In the past, we've called them people-oriented development or pod meetings. In the future, there's our south side neighbors, our north side neighbors. And it was from those meetings back 2-3 years ago, if you can imagine 2-3 years ago, all that was going on, our neighbors were continually saying, we're not safe. It doesn't matter like how affordable these homes are, we're not feeling safe. And it was from those meetings and from that advice, like we need more from you and from service providers, that we gathered with other partners, including PPL, and created something called the Southside Peacekeeping Initiative, which brought together resources from banks and businesses and nonprofits to say, like, the police are doing everything that they can, but it's not enough. And so we're going to be investing in peacekeeping initiatives where individuals are just walking the streets and being kind of like that beat cop that we remember from, I don't remember, but from like 50 years ago, where it was someone who was in relationship with folks and just relationship, like, is everything all right? Can I check in with you? Is everything okay? That was an amazing program, an amazing initiative, a collaborative that came out of the voices of our residents, and we're continually looking for that. And you hear that across this board, like, as service providers, that's the only place that solid solutions come from, are from our residents and from the people who we're serving, because they live this every day. And so they're the ones that we're listening to.
Thank you. Next, sometimes stigma and shame really prevent people who are experiencing homelessness or seeking affordable housing from asking for help. It's an issue. It's a big issue. How does your organization respond to this situation? Anyone?
I can go, because so for Urban Homeworks, we're not working typically in homeless services. We're affordable housing. There are a number of individuals who come to Urban Homeworks who have previously been homeless. About 30% of our residents have been homeless at some point in their lives. But we're providing affordable housing, and so in some ways, I don't know what kind of stigma there might be on our services, because we're just we're providing affordable housing, and it's what every single one of us in this room and in this world needs. And so there's no signs on our buildings or anything. We have affordable homes that are available for rent, affordable homes that we sell for purchase and for home ownership. We're just trying to fill this gap that we wish so hard that the housing system would be able to take care of on its own, but it's not. And so just wanted to say, like, for so much of housing, it's just providing what every one of us need.
So we live daily. We're Project for Pride, and that word pride is very important to us. So we want our residents, we do have people that are experiencing homelessness coming into our buildings. Shelby Commons is a brand new building we just opened, and it's 42 units. 12 of those units will be people coming through the coordinated entry of Hennepin County. And so wanting people to have pride in their living arrangements, and we have a fabulous resident services team that is there to support the family with all kinds of resources, really kind of being the cheerleader, the coach, so that they can maybe move into one of your units. But that it's very important that we want people to know that there's no stigma here at Project for Pride and Living, and pride is very important in our work.
I just wanted to talk about a couple things that come to mind when we talk about stigma. So the first is our Saviour's Community Services, and I'm sure other organizations here practice harm reduction as a philosophy. And harm reduction and housing first often go together. And what that means is that folks can come as themselves and receive services. There's no preconditions to be sober, to be accessing services for your mental health, or be taking medications. We know that when you provide housing to somebody, or in our case, emergency shelter, that's the first step towards the next thing, right? Stability, and that's a self-determined goal for them. So one of the ways that we have talked about kind of the stigma pieces, bringing services into the shelter as well. And so we have physical health, or we have a provider, a nurse that's come into the shelter. We also are providing mental health services in the shelter. A lot of folks who have experienced trauma also have a stigma around receiving mental health services. And so by breaking down that kind of barrier to access, the hope is and the intention is that that will continue even after they leave shelter. They'll be able to seek and access services. Excuse me. This also just reminds me really quickly, briefly, that in a recent newsletter, we talked about Carolyn, who came into our shelter, was discharged from the hospital, not realizing that she was going to be going to a shelter, and that there's a stigma for some folks of being in a shelter. And the first thing she saw, the first person she saw said, "You can leave if you don't want to stay here, but if you do stay here, I'll be here and we'll get through this." And she recently moved into housing, and I think that going back to having staff who can be kind and welcoming helps to alleviate the stigma of receiving services.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I would just add to having different points of access that are relevant to all abilities, relevant to all languages, simple to access. And there's a lot of work to do on that. So you heard Youth Service Network, that's great. We partner with a statewide call center that has text and chat for people to, lots of getting the word out, whether it's social media, text, in person, making sure staff are equipped in all the places and spaces to support these connections. But then also it's tracking when breakdowns happen, when people are turned away. That is very real, and that's where we put a lot of pressure on the system side in collaboration with different coalitions, because like a dream I think we have is that as soon as someone reaches out, they get what they need, and we're just not there yet. And with talking about also people can maximize everything they're doing as a person individually or as a family, but the fact that we have the majority of people facing homelessness are Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ+. There are structural realities, so we also help educate about that, listen to people's stories where they're feeling very defeated that they've done everything, and trying to tell them, you know what, you're doing great, don't let this get you down. There's some things by design here that are creating these conditions. And unless we all take space and time to learn and recognize about that, we're going to have a very hard time getting through this.
Sure, of course.
So we at Avenues, we believe that relationships happen at the speed of trust. And so like many people, my fellow panelists were saying, that it's all about that trust building. And so we have a youth-centered approach. We follow, all of our staff are trained in the 9 guiding principles to help youth overcome homelessness. And so if our program staff were here today, they would be talking about these principles, and I feel like I should share them. But harm reduction, trauma-informed, non-judgmental, keeping youth at the center, youth focus, and I can't name them all, but these are really integral into how we do our work. And we take a one-on-one approach. So when a young person comes in to stay with us, it's time first to breathe, rest, and what are your basic needs, and really building that listening to the youth, following their cues. And then it's really about following their lead. What are their hopes and goals and dreams? And we have a youth advocate and engagement specialist who works individually one-on-one with each young person on that. And that's where that trust and building relationship happens. And sometimes young people might decide this isn't the right place for me at this time. We had a young person share come in and share that they had didn't know that eating 3 meals a day was what everyone did, and had some real challenges around nutrition, and expressed that. It took many months for this young person to feel courageous enough to share this with their youth advocate. And once that happened, that youth advocate helped them to meet with a nutrition specialist, got connected, with the resources that they needed. But so many examples of things like that. But I think that that's at the core of what we do. It's this one-on-one individualized approach.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Our neighbors experience homelessness because of the lack of affordable and deeply affordable housing. How's your organization advocating to transform these systems? Maybe Carla, could I ask you to
Sure.
start?
So systems change is core of what we do at PPL. We are constantly talking to the federal, state, and local officials about trying to eliminate the barriers. Right now, insurance for PPL went up 54% from last year. We're just not going to be able to sustain those kind of increases. And then you add interest rates, construction costs. So we really need officials and advocates to make those systems change immediately. We have a board member that is asking us usually every month, if the property is not going to pencil, why do we keep building? And that's a valid question, right? We need Minnesota Housing to look at, their guidelines. They allow 3% increase. Security is another huge, as you were talking about our coalition. Years ago, we didn't really have to account for security, but people deserve to feel safe in these complexes, and so we are taking those challenges on, but really being at the front of the line and being loud and clear on what the problems are in the system.
So for the first 25 years of Urban Homeworks history, we really were just a home builder. That's what we did. We swung hammers, volunteers would come out and build homes. That's what most people know of Urban Homeworks, and that's really important. But to Tamara's point, if that's all we do, we're not going to get out of this. And to be really clear, having enough affordable homes or having just enough homes is not the only issue. Just this week, Jim Bukta wrote in the Star Tribune that there's a rental reckoning coming to the Twin Cities. And I want to be very clear that that is for a particular group of people. There was a rental reckoning for Black and brown Minnesotans 60 years ago. And it's just now reaching middle-class whites that people are starting to pay attention. And so when we're talking about systems change, we've got to be talking about that, because it's not just about swinging more hammers and building more homes. There's policies at the Minnesota Housing, there's policies in our city that need to change. And so for the last 5 years or so, Urban Homeworks has really stepped into that policy space and have worked with a lot of coalitions around the Bring It Home coalition that Beacon started, and now is like 40 different nonprofits advocating for greater rental assistance for people who qualify. There's 75% of people who qualify for rental assistance can't get it because it's not available for them. We didn't budget for it in our federal government. Everyone who qualifies for a mortgage interest rate deduction gets it automatically, but not for people who actually qualify for rental assistance. That's got to change. We're advocating that corporations aren't as free to buy up single-family homes in our communities and turn them into rentals, which is really just an extractive process that also removes single-family homes for individuals to start their homeownership journey and their wealth-building journey. And we also need to advocate, or we have been advocating for bringing more of those resources to lower income individuals. We often talk about the AMI, the area median income. And for a lot of homes that are built, they're often available for people who are at the 80 to 120% of the area median income. But that area median income is an area, I'm going to geek out on you a little bit here, so is for the entire Twin Cities metro. It's an average of the entire, or median of the entire Twin Cities metro. When you look at our neighbors in North Minneapolis, it's a completely different area median income. So when you say we're offering this home for 80%, or to people who make 80% of the area median income, that's tens of thousands of dollars more than many of our neighbors are making. And so we're advocating at the state and have asked for additional resources in our communities to make homes more affordable for individuals who are living in our neighborhoods. Not just this broad area median income, but like how do we make them more affordable so that people who have lived and are connected to communities like North Minneapolis get to stay in North Minneapolis and buy in North Minneapolis and build strong and stable communities in North Minneapolis. And so those are areas where we're advocating.
Thank you all. Love this group. So we, again, partner with a lot of coalitions that are leading the charge in many spaces to get those policy changes in place. So I'm just not going to go through all of that, but Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless, Youth Intervention Program Association, Violence Free Minnesota, Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault. There's so many involved, and change has been, quite frankly, too slow. I've spent a lot of time in my career on this system change and see amazing people in positions of leadership trying to drive it, and I really think what we need is a shift in the general public who thinks this isn't my issue, this has nothing to do with me, what have people done wrong, that could never be me, and shift and see we are losing investment in humanity and talent. Just imagine the people that people feel are a drain on society. Imagine if that shifted and people were thinking, there's so much talent here. I need them at my business. I need them to work with me. I need to learn from their expertise. We're going to drive innovation so far if we shift that way. And I just really invite that. And if there's one message we can carry out too, I would add that I heard from a national leader years back talking about we do a lot in the housing and homeless world to try and center, affordable homes, housing, but really this is a failure of all other systems as well. So education, criminal justice, child welfare, the same disparities that exist in those places too. So we need huge alignment, starting small still, right? That can happen. Get the right people together, listening to folks who've been through this. And because time's running out, people are dying on the streets. People are, it's not getting better. And so we need to mobilize more, and we need to invite many more people as allies and thinking partners.
I just wanted to add two things. I think touching a little bit on starting small. Recently, there was an emergency recuperative or respite shelter that was attempting to be sited in Uptown, and there was political and community uproar about a recuperative space with folks that are under medical care being discharged to a place because they didn't have somewhere else to go. These are folks that would be recovering in their own home, but for the fact that they don't have a home to go to. And people were upset that that was too close to Uptown. And so we know that with the Trump presidency, that things are actually going to get harder in the next 4 years. And that means we need more people supporting organizations like ours and pushing for change, because it can't be the organizations up here doing the work. We won't be successful if we don't have not only the voices of the participants that we're serving, but people who care about this issue and people who maybe don't care yet, but should care. There's so many reasons why these topics, homelessness especially, is important, and there's a financial aspect to why housing folks makes more sense than continuing to see and have folks on the street. Not only is it inhumane, but there's a financial benefit to it as well. And I just want to, we don't know what's going to come, but we can make a change in our city and in our community with the folks in this room and your colleagues, your friends. We need that help.
Thank you. Thank you all. We still have a few minutes, so I think it's a good time to ask for questions. We can probably take one or two. Go.
Bring the microphone up, yeah.
Excuse me. New at this.
I don't know whether this is one or several. First, I live in East Minneapolis. You've been talking about South and North. So that plus seniors and immigrants. What are you doing about those populations?
So we definitely serve all ages, definitely listen to different strategies that are going to support people, immigrant, making sure there's no barriers and fear. There's huge fear right now for immigrant refugee prior and even escalated now. So we're trying to coordinate how we're going to have allied support to help people with basic needs and safety. And we're getting a lot of questions. I would say seniors typically in referrals get some housing access often a little quicker, yet just by design of some of the system, yet that doesn't, we still of course support seniors with specialty access to all kinds of our services, same as we would specialty for youth too, through partnerships as well, in addition to our direct care, and for immigrant refugees as well.
I mentioned earlier our project on East 7th in St. Paul is in an immigrant neighborhood that really wanted these large these bedrooms to have multiple bedrooms. The other thing I would say is they also wanted not just a playground area, a space for youth, but for the seniors that will be living in these units with their families. I think it's very important. The Highland Bridge project over in St. Paul, we, along with our partners Common Bond, we have 5 lots that we're developing, and so does Common Bond, and I know Common Bond is working on their second project. It's all for seniors and affordable housing, so I don't believe we have a whole affordable housing complex just for seniors, but we do have seniors in our portfolios.
Just going to add to that although we're based in North, we have a house in North Minneapolis and a house in Brooklyn Park. Youth arrive from all over the Twin Cities metro, and we're now even seeing young people contacting us from other states across the country. They're coming here a lot of times for maybe gender affirming care or a variety of reasons, and contacting avenues because they need a place to live. And so, young people find us from many, many places. And I was just going to say 2 things. Our Young Families program is scattered site. So we have, if a young person says, I want to live in East Minneapolis specifically, we have partnerships with landlords, and we'll make sure that they live in East Minneapolis. And our host home model, volunteers, all of us in this room, could open up our homes to host a youth and welcome a youth into our own homes. And so we rely on community volunteers for that. They could live in East Minneapolis or anywhere.
I'll just add quickly, it's not housing related, but our English Learning Center primarily serves folks who are refugees, immigrants, folks who are coming to this country to find a better life. And the age range that we serve only adults, and so that's 18 up to 80. We have students who come to us with all ages. So
I have a couple things. I've tried to work with Hazleton because there's so much drug and alcohol addiction out there combined with the whole homelessness. I got very little reaction, like 4 or 5 calls. I still, they do a little, but you do need that as a partner, all of you, all of us. So that's one thing I'm wondering about is what are we doing about, trying to engage? Because the police have told me, we don't even talk to these people about their addiction because they don't want any help. Anyway, and my second thing is, what are the really concrete ways to help as just a person? Because I have tried to talk to legislators. It was incredibly ineffective. These lawmakers are out to lunch. They don't seem to understand. How do you try to push that so that they will understand? I mean, talking to them individually, would that help? Or, you know, letters don't help? Anyway, I could go on and on, but.
On the substance use, I would just say, you've heard a bit about that, the harm reduction model we follow too. I'm really sad to hear, oh, people don't want help. That's not at all what we hear from people who are struggling, yeah. So it's making accessible, but it's shocking how people are turned away from help because it's not a harm reduction model sometimes, or turned away from housing because it's not a housing first model. And I think people, you know, fortunately, knowing people from all different income backgrounds and demographics, this is an issue across all backgrounds. But it's people without their home or without financial resources to get certain types of care, so reliant on free support and systems, kind of luck of the draw of who you get in touch with to help support your journey. And so fortunately, like you're hearing here, people are working that, making those connections, reducing those barriers, but so much is very high barrier out there for people seeking support on substances. I think on the legislative, I would, any coalition, I think, would love to hear from you and how you could mobilize your neighbors, and because they often face the same things you do, even with the credibility that they've established for over the decades. So definitely connecting with.
Even working with AARP wasn't effective against these legislators.
Wow, yeah.
So when AARP can't do what they need to do to help people, like, that's what I mean. It's a very tough world lawmakers.
It is. Yeah, there's no arguing against that. It does take a long time as well, and we just recognize that the forces that are on the other side of these issues are also advocating, and so we do need to join with coalitions and collaboratives. Sending a letter, I would say, is effective, but it's even more effective if you're doing it in partnership with a lot of others, in making sure that you are connecting with the coalitions that have been talked about up here, joining with. I'm a huge fan of the work that Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative has done in advocating for policies and working with all sorts of faith communities as well as other partners to move forward policy. And so find those and be persistent, be so persistent, and know that it's going to take a while. These systems that we're talking about have been 200 years in the making. It's not going to happen with one legislative session, and so we really have to have the long view, and know that with persistence, that ARC will move toward justice.
I just wanted to add one
Really
quick thing.
quick.
Getting the private sector involved is key. That's one thing we're trying to do at PPL. You know, it's one thing to have nonprofits and the government entities, but the private sector has a role to play in this as well. So any CEOs or COOs out there, come join the fight with us.
Thank you all. Oh, I wish we had yet another hour. We need to wrap up, but we are getting some great questions online, and I did just, without answering, just want to show of hands to one that just came through from a St. Paul school teacher who's very aware if this isn't dealt with the students, they're not ready to learn, obviously. And she wanted to specifically know, are any of you working with the St. Paul Federation of Educators or the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers in a partnership role? I just wanted to put that out there so she can follow up with you privately. Anyone here?
We We have before, we serve.
This is Tamara.
Hi, yeah, we serve in middle and high schools predominantly across the metro doing healthy relationships and violence prevention education, and have had some touch points, but nothing of a focused collaborative, so we'd be happy to connect and hear more.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, I think we're about out of time here, so thank you all for sharing your insights and perspectives. If you're stayed for the 10:30 service, we invite you to continue the conversations with our panelists at their tables at the Westminster Commons after the service. And then next Sunday, our social justice team will host the popular annual Fair Trade Gift Fair in the Westminster Commons. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Thank you all again. Tom, would you just quickly go back one slide? I did just want to point out, in case you hadn't noticed, this is a slide for all the community partners that Westminster works with. Each year we go through and review organizations that are doing great work in our community. We offer grants to them, and then each of them have a personal liaison that they work with throughout the year, just to try to help where we can, obviously within reason. So we have 5 representatives here, but there's another 6 that were part of this year's group. Please feel free to go to the website and you can learn a little bit more. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.